Hey there, business owner. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Evolution Podcast. This is our weekly episode, and I'm so happy you are here. Let's get started. Hi there, entrepreneur. Welcome to this week's episode of the Entrepreneur Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Annette Walter. I am a business growth coach, operations strategist, and CEO of two multi-million-dollar national companies. I'm really happy you're here. This is the place where entrepreneurs like you join me as we share stories of other business owners that are surviving and thriving and building and scaling their businesses to 10 million and beyond. And guess what? You are going to learn something special today from our guest. I am joined today by Michele Sauk. She is a serial entrepreneur, a commercial banker, and really has an eye for identifying opportunities in the marketplace and analyzing business behind them and the data and the numbers behind them. She is smart. She is a mother of three, and you're going to learn a lot about her approach to her businesses and how she's growing them through not only the pandemic, but thriving in 2021. One of her companies is Gymcats Gymnasium. That is a local gymnasium for children and, active teenagers that really are getting started in the gymnastics world and growing into young adulthood, and also owns soon to be four locations of Beans and Brews. That is a local coffee franchise in the Salt Lake City area. She is very talented, and the conversation is great. I can't wait to meet Michele one day. We are virtual colleagues and friends, and I hope to see her one day when we're past COVID so we can play some golf and ski together and really talk business and make some cool things happen. Enjoy this episode. I have lots of opportunities for you to grow and to vent and to evolve as you are scaling your business. Make sure you reach out to me for your one-to-one if you haven't done that already for 2021. This is a safe, judgment-free, confidential zone for you to vent and really process the challenges and opportunities that you are facing right now in your business. Also, we have our Entrepreneur Evolution Empowerment Group. That is a bi-weekly accountability group that is really gaining momentum. And if you just need a jumpstart or an accelerator for March 1st is the launch of our 4-week March Momentum Group. And this is a high-touch, high-intensive group that I will be coaching on the weekly basis with actually a very intimate group. So if you are looking for something to kind of give you that quick launch for second quarter and really regroup in the 2021 year as we are now gaining some momentum for the year, this is a great program. So make sure you're reaching out. Thank you for all of the reviews. Thank you for subscribing, and keep evolving, entrepreneur. You are doing it. I see you. I am with you, and I'm so proud of you. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, Michele.
Hi, how are you?
I am great. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited for you to share your story with the audience. They're going to love everything about you.
Thank you for having me.
We are joined today by Michele Sauk. She is a commercial banker and a serial entrepreneur, a franchise owner, and an owner of a local business. So I cannot wait for you to tell us all about Gymcats and all about Beans and Brews.
Yep, Beans and Brews.
Not the beer.
That's
beer,
right.
right? The beers and brews. I mean, Beans and Brews.
You're not the first one. We've definitely had that.
I've never been out to Utah where you live, and it's like one of the places on my bucket list. And now Beans and Brew is like one of the places on my bucket list. So I cannot wait to come out and visit.
Yes, you have to come. And you won't be the first to think that it was alcohol, because we've had out-of-state people that are like looking at the menu like, so is there beer? And we're like, no, just coffee.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
So you and I have a lot in common. I grew up in the banking industry, and you are still in the banking industry. And I just love the parallels of how much you can take it into growing businesses. I love everything that you are doing. So I cannot wait to hear like the in-depth story behind the scenes. So you start wherever you want to start.
Yeah. Okay.
And kind of just walk us up today, and then we'll talk about some challenges and obstacles and opportunities that you have right now in the marketplace.
Sure. Yeah. So it is funny because we have a lot of parallels in our stories.
I love it.
Because I've been listening to your podcast. And so I also graduated high school in 95.
Okay.
And went to school in Utah. And when I graduated, I just wanted to be a stockbroker. So I don't know why. I probably saw a movie. You get to that point where it's like, oh, I have to pick a major.
Right.
And so I started as a registered investment advisor. And when my husband was transitioning in careers and we needed to move out of state, it's like, oh man, like starting a new book of business, that could be challenging. Like, what should I do? Who he was going with knew someone at a large national bank. It's like, oh, you should work there. And so I became an advisor and lender at this national bank because at the time, obviously, this was like 2004 or 5. And you know what lending was doing. It's like everyone needed to be a lender. And so, fast forward to, wanting to get back to Utah, still doing lending, asked me to do SBA lending with the same national bank. I was like, well, I've never done that, but I guess I could.
Right.
And so, I looked at kind of the market and the size of the market and what the opportunity was like, I think that will be a good thing and it gets me home. So, came back to Utah, did that role for 6 years and then transitioned into commercial lending. And the funny thing is so I skipped a part, but the very first loan that I did when I moved back to Utah was the commercial real estate for gym cats. Wow. So a little bit of an occupational hazard is my story. So I very first loan when I got back, it was my old college roommate and she needed her building. So my first loan in Utah was financing the building for Gym Cats at the Point Gymnastics.
Wow.
And then, so moved into the commercial lending and into, bigger, more complex deals. I think, 2009, 10 hit and we were all just grateful to have a job.
Right.
And, I certainly was, but it also made me realize that, wow, being, one, not diversified and two, being reliant on commission only, because not commission only, but heavy commission. So SBA world, the banks typically pay you like a modest salary and then you get paid monthly off of the deals that you do. And it was great in 7, 8, 9. And then when it suddenly there aren't commissions, it's like, maybe I should get into different level of lending.
Well, and the deals were getting so much more complicated and prolonged, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it was after that, banks were realizing that you needed to have strong lenders and qualified lenders. And frankly, none of the banks were doing a great job on training on cash flow analysis, structuring deals. And so, my world was changing and I'm like, well, they're wanting me to do different things, but not necessarily providing the opportunities to learn that in that SBA world. And so that was a big, I'm like a lifelong learner. I like challenge. I like to learn. And I wanted to be able to continue to do my job well. And so jumping over into the commercial side allowed me to do that, deal with larger companies, different challenges, different types of loans. And so now I'm the commercial banking manager for a small regional bank, which, going from national bank to small bank, I like. I like being able to talk to customers and tell them what we can do and actually do it. Because what I was realizing is, it was just getting more challenging with the bigger banks and, deals were taking longer, not always knowing what we could and couldn't do, but thinking that we could. And so I'm in a good spot now. So that's kind of the banking career.
Well, and you're so smart. Like you can just see things. And I love watching you, just kind of like think about things because I can see it like knitting across your forehead, just the answers and like it like becoming just, something of just big substance in your head. And I love it. And, to go from the SBA side and then into the commercial side, into way like a bigger analytical piece of that. Was that challenging at all?
Oh yeah. Cause when I switched, it was like, I think it was like my second week there. Cause the first week I remember I went to a different institution. The person that hired me, my first week, they had it off and I show up and it's like, oh, I guess I just will be here this week, so second week I'm there, they put some Moody spreads in front of me and are like, well, what do you think of this? And I'm like, I don't even really know what I'm looking at. And so, so I just start asking, but I ask questions. So when I don't totally know, it's like, well, what are we looking for? Well, what is the challenge? So that I think has always been my strength in asking questions and try to understand. Yeah. And for whatever reason, I don't tend to come off in a judgmental way. I mean, I don't think I do, but I believe that because people tend to answer my questions and they believe that I'm genuine in my ask. And I think that's because I usually am. I'm a very curious person and I love to see how businesses function. And I want to know like, oh, wow, this is, interesting. And I love it when business owners that have like a CFO and think they know all the things and their CPA is amazing. And then I'll get in there and ask questions and they're like, these are really good questions. And I'm going to have to, think about it. That's when I know I'm doing my job right. And so I get a lot of joy from that.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
So date stamp us here. Where are we on the timeline? Yeah. And then when do these
so I'll interject.
Okay.
Yeah. So after jumping out of SBI, I think it was 2012 that I wrote on my vision board, like I need to have passive income. And because I think it was like, post recession, like things are starting to come out, but it's like, that was just an eye opener. I think for a lot of us to be like, wow, like this is a problem. If this is like the only thing, like even, if you're only in commercial real estate, if you're only in your business. And so it's like, I got to come up with passive income. I didn't know what it would be, but I just opened myself to the opportunity of, I got to have passive income. And so I think it was 2000. So it took a few years. So 2016, I was talking to another one of my customers, which happened to be Beans and Brews corporate.
Okay.
I banked that franchise for 10 years.
Okay.
And, we were out golfing and they were talking about investment group that had come in and wanted to, place that brand in Idaho. And I was like, okay, I think that this is going to, go well for them. And I think that this is going to be big. And I was excited for them. And like a day later, I'm like, I think this would be good for us. And so I called them the next day and was like, hey, do you guys want to sell me a franchise? And they said, well, I don't, we won't have one for a couple of years. And I was like, that's okay. My husband's still on a contract because at this point in time, so this would have been 2016. Okay. I have 3 kids. My husband is still traveling exorbitant amounts of time. My eye is twitching because I've got, now 3 kids that need to be in 3 different places.
And you're working,
like, I got to get him home. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, well, we won't have one for a couple of years. So I'm like, oh, that's fine. Like he's still under contract. So I'll just pay for the franchise. And then, when it's available, we'll do that. And so we paid for that. And then I want to say it was either December of 16 or January of 17 that my former client, Jim Katz, she called me and was like, I'm really going to sell my business. And I don't know what to do. I'm getting all of these questions. And so I walked her through like, okay, these are the steps that you need to take. And this is what you need to do. And this is how you answer the questions that people are asking, because a lot of times buyers don't know either. And it's like, well, wait, but can I have the building or can I not have the building or why are you selling at this price? And so I walked her through all that. And then I got a really nice email from her after that conversation that was like, thank you so much. I've always been a great mentor. And I got that email and was like, gosh, I really think that I should buy her business.
Right. And Jim Katz is like gymnastics, right? A whole gymnastics zone for kids mainly.
Yep.
Yep.
So
Okay.
it's a recreational gym. So 12,000 square foot facility that caters to, 18 months to 18 years,
Okay.
primarily recreation focused. There's also a competition team.
Right.
There's Ninja. And so, I talked to my husband and was like, I think that we should buy this gym. And he said, well, do you think it would put the coffee shop at risk? And I said, well, it could, but I still think that it's a good investment and a good idea. And we still had time, right? Because this was the beginning of 17 and I wasn't going to get a coffee shop for a couple of years.
Right.
And so we went through, did all the due diligence on that, was sitting at the lawyer's office signing for that, and got a call from Beans and Brews. It was like, hey, we think we have a location for you. Are you ready?
Oh my God. When it rains, it pours, right?
Yes. And I was like, I think so. And they're like, you think so? Like, we thought that you were excited about this. And I'm like, no. We are excited, but I didn't say accidentally. I'm like, but I actually just bought another business. And they're like, wait, what? And so I'm like, so I go, you have to give me 2 weeks to see if I can put the capital together. Because the thing about franchising is it's not like if they come to us and say, do you want to buy one? And we say no, that we're out forever and we can never have one.
Okay.
It would just mean, no for now, but let us know on the next one. And so I said, you just got to give me 2 weeks to let me, figure out if I can put the capital together, because you have to remember, this is the group that would come to me and say, hey, we're looking at a franchisee. Can you tell us if they will be a good fit and they can afford it and they can make it work? And so if me, the banker, tells them I'm going to do the deal, they're not going to go and do due diligence on me. And there's not a lender for them to talk to, they're trusting me. So I'm like, give me a couple of weeks. So, went through those couple of weeks and, was kind of looking at okay, well, what is the gym going to do? And had forecasted that. And where are we at personally? And what does that cash situation look like? And really, what is the time frame? Because when they say that one's ready, that still means that it needs to be built out.
Right.
So we probably had a 9-month runway.
Okay.
And so ultimately we decided to do that. So 2017 was a really crazy year for us, because we basically took over the gym on March 1st. And then we ended up opening our first Beans and Brews, July 24th of 2017. So in a 6-month period, we went from not being any business owner to owning a 6-figure business, and then starting up, what is now a 7-figure business. So
it's amazing. Let me ask you this, Michele, were you making decisions at that point? Were you making spreadsheet sheet decisions and just running all the numbers, or were you listening to your gut and your instinct? What type of decision maker are you? Or are you a blend of both, really?
I'm a blend of both, because the gym was instinctual, that I was I think that we should do this. But then I did 100 spreadsheets. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is a good idea. Let me just back it up. So
this feels right, but let me just say.
Yeah. And I hadn't been fully ingrained in her business, because I did her real estate piece. And so I wasn't actually her operating company banker. Where with the Beans, I didn't really need to do numbers, because I had been doing their numbers for the past, 10 years. I knew all the numbers. I had helped other franchisees get loans. And so I just knew. I'm like, and I knew that there was a risk. I take very, I think, analytical and educated risks. But I also knew one store wouldn't break us. So I think I always go to, what is the worst thing that can happen? And if I can tolerate the worst thing that can happen, then I typically do it. Because I think what maybe everyone, but I think women in particular have a hard time seizing opportunities and taking risk. Although anything that you go to, and you'll know this from even, early 2000s, where it's women have to be better at taking risks, but it's well, who's the one that's saying, well, this is a risk and this is a risk and this is the one you should take and this is the one that you shouldn't. And I just remember hearing over and over, you have to take risks, and you have to, whether it's in your career or a business, because it's okay, well, what if my company wants me to go on the X path, but I thought I was on the Y path? It's well, sometimes you have to go on that path to get back to a higher point, on the Y path. And so for me, it was I had that kind of gut feeling with both of them. I knew that the numbers backed it up, and I just knew that they were risks that I understood. And I think that's the other thing, I think if you go to Warren Buffett, it's like, he always invests in things that he understood or could, like, he's a consumable type guy.
Right.
And for me, it was like, people are like, how would you just go a business that you don't have any experience? Like, I was never a gymnast, that you don't have any experience in. And it's like, but I have a lot of experience in analyzing businesses and whether or not, they're going to have positive cash flow and be profitable. And that's what I trusted. And so that's kind of the timeline.
I think that is such an important point. And, you see the practitioners who become business owners, right? So the dentist that is an expert in their space, or the plumber that is an expert in their space, all of a sudden put on the business owner hat, and they run into challenges because it's a completely different skill set. And when you come at it with those banking eyes, with the operational structure and strategy and knowing, the numbers tell the story. We say this all the time. I think you and I have said this before. The numbers tell the story. And when you can really understand cash flow management, operations, sales, and the ins and outs of business behind the scenes, really, it doesn't matter what the industry is. For the most part.
Well, here's the thing that I did have points in time. I had to do a paradigm shift with this, and I learned it from a student this year, who was taking an entrepreneurial class and asked to interview me. But there have been points in time in owning the gym where I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should have had more experience in that, because I think I could have done this, this, and this. And when I told them that, they said, that's interesting, because our professor says that it's almost better not to have experience, because if you have experience, then you'll jump back into, like if your coach quits, and it's like, you'll just like start coaching. And it's like, that's not the highest and best use of my time. And in an instant, I knew that they were right. And I changed my mind about how I had thought about me not having the actual like fundamental, like I can teach a cartwheel experience, because I'm like, she's absolutely right. I totally would have. My personality is like, I'm a solution. I can figure out the solution. I'll figure it out. And I would have absolutely probably been stuck working in my business when, I'm sure that you talk to tons of people, and it's a lot of them are trying to figure out how to work out of their business or on their business, and not having that technical experience, but more of the financial experience, made it so that I always have to be working on my business. I don't have the skill set to work in my business and teach, and teaching the, front tucks and back handsprings and all that.
Right. Well, and the problem solving though is an amazing skill. So this is so much fun. Like all of a sudden I'm like knitting together this like TV show that we could have together of just like investing in all these companies, Michele,
yes.
What's next?
Do
what
it.
do you want to buy
Let's
next?
Do it. Yeah. That's why I say it's an occupational
it's so
hazard,
fun,
right?
isn't it?
It's like, oh dear. Like, and I think at some point I was talking to one of my customers, and then they were getting ready to sell their business, and they knew that I had these others, and they're like, so what about you? I was like, don't get me started. I'm like, don't even.
Right.
And I'm like, I can't, I'm tapped out. But yeah, you kind of look at it. It's like, oh yeah, I could make that work. I could figure that out. So yeah.
So I get this question all the time, and I'm sure you do too. How do you divide your time between the three businesses? I don't like this question, but I have to ask it just because I'm curious. I can really relate as to how your day goes. It all just blends, and it's like you make it all happen, right?
Yeah. So I do get that question a lot right after. It's like, wow, you're like a special breed of crazy. Like I sure am. So I had to get really good at managing my calendar and what I say no to and what I say yes to. So if I don't zone in on my time at the bank and what I need to do there, and that I'm really clear with the people that I work with, then that will bleed a lot into, weekends, evenings. And so I had to get really good, which I should have done anyway, but in corporate, like you just let it bleed into like 3 a.m., wake up in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And so I should have done that anyway. But I got really good at, when the day is done at the bank, the day is done at the bank. And then just making sure with the gym, that I'm planning out my year in advance. So I'm doing that in fourth quarter of the prior year. I'm meeting with my director and going over like, this is what we need to accomplish in Q1. This is what we need to accomplish in Q2, Q3, Q4. And it's been around long enough that you kind of know, like, this is when the camp is going to be. This is when summer camps are going to be. This is when fall enrollment will be. It's very much, I mean, this year kind of changed a lot of things, but there are still certain things that just need to happen. And so then it's an easier, like, we have a Monday morning touch point on, we're tracking numbers a lot more closely now, because obviously we closed for 2 months in the pandemic. And so we're not quite to pre-COVID numbers, but I want to, we're trying to get there quickly. We're doing ads to make that happen. And so we touch point each Monday. And, if there are things that come up, then, she absolutely knows that she can get a hold of me. But for the most part, I'll usually spend a week of planning on that, and then just those quick Monday morning touch points. And so that's how that piece gets managed. And then the coffee shop, we have 3 of them now. So we opened our first one in 2017. And then what year is it? 2021. So in December of 2019, we bought our second one. So we didn't have to start that one up. We bought our second one from a different franchisee. And then in 2020, amidst a pandemic, signed a lease for a new one on March 4th. And then, the world fell apart shortly thereafter. And so we opened our third one in August of 2020, and we'll likely open our fourth one in August of this year, 2021. And that, I rely a lot on my husband. And that was kind of why, and we had to have a sit down at that point where it's like, I think this is a good business. I believe in it. I know it can work, but someone has to be there.
Right.
And so, like, you have to believe that, you got to want to run a coffee shop. And if you don't want to do that, then, speak now or forever hold your peace. Because I have always known that I believe that before you can work on your business, you do have to work in your business, just so that you can understand it. And so, and I will say, so from the gymnastics standpoint, as the owner, I had to get in there and get a professional license. I learned coaching. I took coaching classes. I coached classes for about 6 months so that I could just understand and like communicate with my staff. And so same thing with the coffee shop. That's why 17 was hard, because I was working at the bank, working at the gym, and at the coffee shops. My husband and I were both there every day for the first 6 months. So the coffee shops now, like, he's got that down, and he is pretty much running that on a day-to-day basis. But we've also built that up. I think what I'm good is kind of that operational finance side, figuring out this is what the numbers need to look like. This is what we need to track to. He's really good at making sure that we have the right people in place. And so we've got it to the point now that he's about 2 hours a day at the coffee shop. And so same thing, like, he has 3 weekly checkpoints with the 3 different managers. And then when we do the 4th store, we'll hire an area manager.
Right.
So the strategy has always been that we are working to have that be a passive income stream. And so far it's going well.
That's great. So our audience is full of entrepreneurs at various different stages all across the United States, different stages of their business, different revenue sizes, employee-based sizes. So with your banker hat on right now, what would be some words of wisdom to the entrepreneurs out there if they're looking at, I have a lot of people that are looking at acquiring buildings right now, or just recently have. What are some good banking strategies that you have right now in this landscape, in this marketplace, as we're talking right now, 2021?
Yeah. So from the banking side, like, we have seen the companies that are doing well are doing really well. The companies, I think, that pivoted and figured things out are going to make it through this. I think the ones that are, relying pretty much 100% on government assistance, they need to figure out quickly, like, what their cash flow situation is going to be and if it's sustainable. So whether you're in a recession or not in a recession, I mean, the first rule is cash flow is king. And so if you don't have, cash to back you up, then you can't make it through a recession. Our real estate market is doing really strong here. So we are still actively providing financing for people investing in their real estate. I still believe that that is a great investment for business owners to have. But I think that what I always tell people is, I think people tend to forget about their balance sheet, and the balance sheet is really important. And I think a lot of business owners, they don't understand it because they don't get to see, it's like, well, wait, what's the bottom line number? How much money did we make? So I guess my two things are, don't wonder how much money you're making, and understand your balance sheet and understand like, okay, well, if I'm going to put that real estate in a holding company, okay, it's because my accountant says that that's smart. Well, what impact does that have on my business? And if I have to sign a rental agreement with my holding company, then, can I afford the rent that I'm going to pay on this? Because I'll have business owners that will come and it's like, well, yeah, we'll just, that business makes sense. But it's like, you're going to be paying $100,000 more in rent to cover the payment on this. And so sometimes business owners get hung up on, well, oh my gosh, I've been wasting so much money on rent. And if I could have just owned my own building, then I would have been rich by now. But it's like, well, but do you have that extra cash? So there's been plenty of times I've had conversations with people where it's like, that $100,000 is coming from you. That's coming from your distributions that, that you're taking. So like, just be mindful of that. And I know that you target like that above 5 and 10 and more. And I will say, I have seen plenty of $8 million a year businesses turn into that are beautiful, ran well, numbers look great, margins look great. And I've seen them turn themselves into a terrible $15 million a year business. So just because right? It's like, yeah. And so I think that would be why the numbers, because I think you get to a certain point where you have a certain amount of cash and you suddenly can get loans and you can get money. It's like, oh, this is great. We're doing so well. And then I'm looking at it from the bank going, your margin is shrinking at a really fast clip. And so like, can you tell me like what you're doing? And sometimes they can. And if they can, then I'm okay with that. A lot of times they can't.
Right.
And so it's like your overhead, like your payroll went up. What was that? And it's like, oh yeah, we hired a marketing person. We'll see return on that in a year. But sometimes it's like 0.5% here, 1% here, 1% here. And it's like, you got to clean that up when you scale. I think the goal is that your margin gets better. And so that would be the thing, but just keep paying attention to the numbers, pay attention to the balance sheet, pay attention to the profit and loss, and make sure that just because you're getting bigger, it doesn't guarantee that you're getting better.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and it's like that pace of growth, as the revenue is ticking up, those expenses and adding to the team and scaling, it's a very fine line. It's very tricky to figure out. You have to be very strategic and cost effective with every single dollar, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're dealing now with going to the 4th store. It's like, okay, well, if we hire that area manager, that's just a flat, that range is $50,000 to $60,000. So that's just a flat, $50,000 that like just is money that is just gone because they don't, even though they impact it, that's just something that's buying a little bit more of our freedom. So it's like, just balancing that. But yeah, it's easy to like when you have money to be like, oh yeah, well, let's just buy that, spend that. So yeah, the balance is tricky.
It is. Well, and it speaks to the book that I think you and I were referencing the other day, that The Great Game of Business, about making your employees revenue producing employees, regardless of their role, right? Which is an interesting concept.
Yep.
And then the other book that's been coming up a lot is Profit First, which is, have you read that one yet? Mm-hmm.
I have. I do like it. I think that the last bucket is like investing. And so, that's what we did last year. We're really getting into that pool, but I like it because there's so many, like when I was dealing with SBA and the small businesses, that they just aren't paying themselves anything. They are just spinning their wheels in the mud. And so I like that it's like, start with 1%, if you're making if you're grossing $50,000 a year, but then you're not paying yourself a dime and you maybe are still putting stuff on credit cards. It's like, decide if it's a hobby or a business. And if you can't give yourself 1%, then figure out how to do that. Or maybe it's a hobby. So I like that it's like, yeah, can we get to 25%? Can we get to 30%? We hope so. But if you can't get to 1%, then maybe we have a problem. But it's like, start with 1, then get to 2, then 5, then So I do like that. And, the tax thing I agree with, because I think the business owners forget and they get to the end of the year and then they're just like, wait, what? I owe what? Or, oh, I got it. I don't think that should be quite a mystery. And if it is going to be a mystery, I think it's probably good that at least you have a pool of money sitting there where it's like, oh, well, okay, I have enough to cover it. So I do like that. I do like the concept that he educates people on.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good read. It's a pretty good read. And it really simplifies it from, I'd say, just really any level business that, it just gives you a different spin on things, which is great to look at. So what are you asking of the universe right now? How can we help you? What do you want to put out there as your big ask?
My ask of the universe is, I think I hear you say a lot, like, figuring out what that next step is. And if you're not, jumping to that next step, you're not really growing. And so, I think that I'd like to do something similar to what you're doing, where you're like, okay, I think I have a unique talent in helping, business owners. And so I like talking to business owners. So I'd love to hear, what people's challenges are, so that, as I'm researching and determining, what is that next step for me, that I kind of know, like, wow, if I could ask a banker anything and not have any questions or judgment, and that they really understand me, I think there's probably a book out there on all of the different stories. And so, yeah, I guess that's my big ask is, they can shoot me an email or find me on social and ask a banker anything.
I love that. That's a good niche. We might have to expound on that a little bit.
I know, we're going to have a TV show, remember?
I know. We can start pitching it. I mean, we don't even need a TV station anymore. It's like right now you have a show, right?
Exactly.
I love it.
Yep.
So the kids are good. Everybody's good. So for the most part, I mean, considering COVID and all this wonderful things that we're going through right now, everybody's good.
Yeah, I think that we're good. I mean, it was certainly scary in March and April but again, I just went through that step of what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst? I always go back to, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I like that.
And it has served me well so far. I mean, that I have a type 1 diabetic daughter. I know you have a type 1 diabetic son. And it was the same thing when we knew that it was going down the path of that. And there's, turmoil in our hearts around, what that might mean. We just spent some time and it's like, okay, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? And what's the worst thing that can happen? Like in that moment of time where you're discovering that that's happening. And at the end of the day, it was like, okay, so we have the worst thing today is that we're going to have to give ourselves shots. And, do people have it worse than that? Yes. Do people manage that? Yes. So can we do this? Yes. So, I think that that's the biggest thing is just, I always just go back to, what's the worst thing? And when the pandemic hit, it was like, what's the worst thing? And can I survive the worst thing? And the answer, always tends to be yes. And so that tends to allow me to get to that next step and keep moving forward. So yeah, I think that we're all doing good. Kids are good. The 14-year-old teenager, she's got lots of lessons to teach me. I learned this week that I'm not supposed to use the cry emoji anymore, because like the laughing with tears, because it makes you, it's an indicator that you're old. So.
Oh, I'm glad you told me that, because that's my go-to.
I know. Apparently it's everyone in our age demographic go-to. So the teenagers are done with it. It's over. So
okay. Well, I need progressive glasses now, and all of these things are happening to me now. So that doesn't surprise me that I'm using outdated emojis.
Right. Yeah. So on our TV show, that's the other thing people can send me. Like, send me all the things that I should know that I don't. Like, oh, no, it's not skinny jeans anymore. We're back to bell bottoms. It's not that emoji. It's this one. So people can send me that, and then they can ask bankers questions.
Okay, yes. Yeah. Keep us cool, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I love your energy. I'm so glad we got this time. Thank you so much for being here. And
thank you.
I love learning from you. I love getting to know you. And I hope one day we can play golf together, or do something fun, or ski together, or do something really fun. Yes. Have coffee.
Okay, yeah, you have to come here. Together. You come here.
I know.
You can come here. We can golf. We can ski on the same day. So we can golf and ski on the same day in the spring, and we'll go and grab some coffee.
I love it. I love it. You're amazing.
Yes.
Congrats on all of your success and your continued success. It's just amazing. And you're an inspiration. Thanks for sharing your story today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. I'll drop everything in the show notes so that people can find you. And we'll talk to you soon, Michele. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Bye. Wow. What an episode. Did you learn something new? I hope so. I am so happy you were able to be here with us today. I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a review and I will be sure to read it and respond to you. Also, if you'd like to email me, my email address is yourock@ievolveconsulting.com. Hit subscribe, and every Tuesday you'll get notification when the next episode drops. We really have some amazing interviews and tips in the future. Anything you need, I'm here for you. I want you to keep your momentum. I want to help you stay accountable. I want you to stay inspired. I want you to evolve. So please let me know what you need, and I'd love to hear from you. Take care until next time.